wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Welcome to the Sunday Stoic podcast. My name is Steve. I'm just a humble biology teacher, father, and husband, trying to figure out how to live well in this world. I used to think I had it all figured out, and then I became a bit of a skeptic, a scientific skeptic, and thought maybe I don't have everything figured out. And now I've torn everything down, and I'm slowly rebuilding back up again into someone who knows he knows nothing, but at least has a plan on how to navigate his ignorance. And that is kind of where I am as a human being. And I have been sharing with you now for a few years just my thoughts on various Stoic readings, and that's what we're here to do today. And this week we're going to hear from a single reading from Seneca on self-control. I've been reading actually some Epictetus lately. We've had some Patreon discussions with my patrons on Epictetus, and I've also made a couple of videos on the first couple books of the Enchiridion on YouTube. And Epictetus talks about how we must conquer our desires first of all. Basically eliminate desire and focus on orienting our aversions to the right things. And I think there's a little flavor of that here in Seneca's letter. If you recall, Seneca was a little earlier than Epictetus. Their lives overlapped in time, but Seneca was writing a little earlier, so he has a slightly different take on Stoicism, perhaps maybe a little more like the middle Stoa. But he's going to talk to his perhaps fictional, perhaps real friend Lucilius here about emotions, about getting rid of emotions. But I think if we read more deeply, we'll see we're getting rid of mostly negative emotions, and we may be keeping other emotions in check so that they are not our masters. But we can still feel pleasure. We can still feel joy. But we're trying to avoid anger, fear, and emotions like that especially. Moral Letters to Lucilius by Seneca, number 116, on self-control. The question has often been raised whether it is better to have moderate emotions or none at all. Philosophers of our school reject the emotions. The Peripatetics keep them in check. I, however, do not understand how halfway disease can either be wholesome or helpful. Do not fear. I am not robbing you of any privileges which you are unwilling to lose. I shall be kindly and indulgent towards the objects for which you strive, those which you hold to be necessary to our existence or useful or pleasant. I shall simply strip away the vice. For after I have issued my prohibitions against the desires, I shall still allow you to wish that you may do the same things fearlessly and with greater accuracy of judgment, and to feel even the pleasures more than before. And how can these pleasures help coming more readily to your call, if you are their lord rather than their slave? But, you object, it is natural for me to suffer when I am bereaved of a friend. Grant some privileges to tears which have the right to flow. It is also natural to be affected by men's emotions, and to be cast down when they are unfavorable. So why should you not allow me such an honorable aversion to bad opinion? There is no vice which lacks some plea. There is no vice that at the start is not modest and easily entreated, but afterwards the trouble spreads more widely. If you allow it to begin, you cannot make sure of its ceasing. Every emotion at the start is weak. Afterwards it rouses itself and gains strength by progress. It is more easy to forestall than to forego it. Who does not admit that all the emotions flow, as it were, from a certain natural source? We are endowed by nature with an interest in our own well-being, but this very interest, when overindulged, becomes a vice. Nature has intermingled pleasure with necessary things, not in order that we should seek pleasure, but in order that the addition of pleasure may make the indispensable means of existence attractive to our eyes. Should it claim rights of its own, it is luxury. Let us therefore resist these faults when they are demanding entrance, because, as I have said, it is easier to deny them admittance than to make them depart. And if you cry, one should be allowed a certain amount of grieving and a certain amount of fear, I reply that the certain amount can be too long drawn out, and that it will refuse to stop short when you so desire. The wise man can safely control himself without becoming over-anxious. He can halt his tears and his pleasures at will. But in our case, because it is not as easy to retrace our steps, it is best not to push ahead at all. I think that Peripatetics gave a great neat answer to a certain youth who asked him whether the wise man should become a lover. As to the wise man we shall see later, but you and I, who are as yet far removed from wisdom, should not entrust ourselves to fall into a state that is disordered, uncontrolled, enslaved to another, contemptible to itself. If our love be not spurned, we are excited by its kindness. If it be scorned, we are kindled by our pride. Uneasily won love hurts as much as one which is difficult to win. We are captured by that which is compliant, and we struggle with that which is hard. Therefore, knowing our weakness, let us remain quiet. Let us not expose this unstable spirit to the temptations of drink, or beauty, or flattery, or anything that coaxes or allures. Now that which Peripatetics replied to the question about love may be applied, I believe, to all the emotions, in so far as we are able. Let us step back from slippery places. Even on dry ground it is hard enough to take a sturdy stand. At this point, I know you will confront me with that common complaint against the Stoics. Your promises are too great, and your counsels too hard. We are mere mannikins, unable to deny ourselves everything. We shall sorrow, but not to any great extent. We shall feel desires, but in moderation. We shall give way to anger, but we shall be appeased. And do you know why we have not the power to attain this Stoic ideal? It is because we refuse to believe in our power. Nay, of a surety, there is something else which plays a part. It is because we are in love with our vices. We uphold them and prefer to make excuses for them rather than shake them off. We, mortals, have been endowed with sufficient strength by nature. If only we use this strength, if only we concentrate our powers and rouse them all to help or at least not hinder us. The reason is unwillingness, the excuse, inability. Farewell.
So what is Seneca talking about here? Well, he's writing to Lucilius, and he is saying, well, we have no idea, first of all, what Lucilius' letter to Seneca was, right? But we can see his reply. And Seneca's saying, well, we need to get some control on our emotions. And there are two different schools of thought represented in this text. He talks a bit about the Peripatetics, or the followers of Aristotle, who thought that having some kind of anger was a useful tool to get you fired up to cause action, for example. Righteous indignation, right? For example. And he says, well, how could any amount of disease be a good thing? You know, these are diseases of the soul, not something that can be cultivated and used for good, is his argument. And he tells Lucilius here that, but don't worry, your ultimate aims are still safe. Your ultimate aims of wanting to be courageous and have great accuracy of judgment, to experience pleasure, all of those things are still going to be intact when we correct this peripatetic falsehood and we get rid of these emotions. You'll still be able to experience good things. You'll still be able to be courageous. You'll still be able to be full of reason even without these emotions. And then there's the argument, but what about when I lose a friend? What about this? What about that? And Seneca argues that no matter what vice or emotion it is you're trying to reduce in your own psyche, there will be excuses not to do it. And I know elsewhere he gives slightly different advice on dealing with grief, but we won't go there today. But every vice will have a plea. And his concern is if you let it stay, if you let it in, it's going to ruminate, it's going to increase in strength, it's going to get a grip on you. And then you're going to have distress, anxiety. And he's trying to be more Stoic than that, and trying to teach Lucilius to be more Stoic than that. And he says that we are endowed by nature with certain drives that have pleasure accompanied with them in order to make, so we'll eat, for example. Eating is pleasurable. Why? It's necessary for life. Procreating is pleasurable. Why? It's necessary for life. But then he says also, should those pleasures then claim rights of their own, and you're doing them for the pleasure, not just simply for the reason why that act exists, then they become a luxury. And of course, Stoics would not be too big a fan of luxury. So he's arguing against passions and excesses. We can still enjoy life, we can still be courageous, but he says we basically need to use reason rather than these emotions. All right, so lastly, getting towards the end there, he talks about Penadius, one of the, I know I always mispronounce his name, but he's one of the middle Stoics, about love, which is kind of interesting that Penadius argues that we should not take a wife, as it were, for in their case, because then you are not ready yet, you're not wise enough yet to deal with being that tied into someone who's out of your power to control, I guess. Whereas Epictetus, I believe, says that we are not cynics. We can take a wife, and this is not saying you can't, but that you shouldn't do it until you're well down the road of being wise. Which I guess it's too late for me, but that's okay. But he argues that this way of thinking applies to everything, and it reminded me of Epictetus's Enchiridion, where he says, for now, get rid of desire. You're not ready to desire things appropriately yet. And Seneca says, for now, avoid slippery places. Don't desire emotions. Don't bring up emotions that you're not ready to control yet. You're not ready to feel these things and keep them in check. You don't have the ability to tell them to stop. And he says we have the power to control these emotions. We just tend to ignore that power, and we pretend that it's our inability to do it, but in reality, it's our unwillingness to do it. Now, I am no psychologist, but I don't know. I don't know about those things, but I do know that preventing negative thoughts that are controlling your life is important. Having anger issues. Let's not worry about getting rid of anger entirely for now. If you have anger issues, there are ways that we can work on those. And rather than saying, I don't have the ability to do it, you slowly chip away at it. You make it a priority in your life, and you get some self-help books, or you see someone to talk to, and you work on these things. So these negative emotions, if we can remove them, we can feel the good things in life more fully. Of course, if we have to control ourselves with medication, it may lower our ability to feel the joys while keeping the valleys from being so deep. But you can explore those avenues at your own leisure. Once again, I'm just a guy with a microphone. But we can work on these things. I know I have made some improvement in my life. I still make poor decisions. I still get angry. I still do things like that. But I catch them more frequently, or at least I think about them. I know that I'm possibly doing it at the time, so at least I know I'm making a poor decision. For whatever reason, you do it anyway. Sometimes you can catch yourself and stop yourself by being more mindful, by paying more attention to these things. So what's your opinion? Is a little bit of anger a good thing? Are you leaning more towards Aristotle, or do you think it would be better to have an army of individuals that are calm and don't feel anger and rather be roused to fight by reason. Like, hey, these folks are trying to invade our country. We don't want them to do that. Take them down. Or would you rather them be mad that these folks are trying to invade? Take them down. What's the differences there? But we can say for sure that we can work on removing, and I won't say removing, but toning down those negative passions in our lives. That anger, that lust, that greed, that sometimes I've had some listeners ask me why ambition is considered a vice. It's sort of a passion. And ambition doesn't mean I'm gonna do good today, or I'm going to work on myself. Ambition is more like I want power. I want to have power. I really want to control people and then have wealth pour in and things like that. That in itself is a vice. It's beyond your power for one, but while you're pursuing it, you're focused on that rather than growing in virtue. So those are the things we want to get on top of. And uncontrolled grief. I'm not saying we want to bottle ourselves up either, so we have to be careful there. But we don't want to become to allow grief to grow to depression. And so on and so forth. So those are some things to think about while reading Seneca, and to see if what do you think? Are Stoics supposed to be emotionless, or are they allowed to feel some things? The very last thing I want to end with is that statement, like we are. The argument that are we supposed to be mannequins, or are we mannequins? That was interesting. Like, we don't want to be mannequins. I don't want to be a mannequin. If being a mannequin is the Stoic way, I'm going to go towards Aristotle. But we won't feel things in excess that are negative. We'll feel them. We'll keep them in check. But we will feel them. We will not be impervious to feeling or thought. So that's what I think the perfect Stoic is, but I don't think I have to worry about it. Seneca likes to write about the perfect Stoic, that they would be heavily unfeeling, perhaps, and let a lot of things roll off their back. But we're never going to be that person. We are on a lower rung of that ladder. We are going to feel things. Our goal is just to try to let the bad things roll off our backs a little more easily than we would have if we hadn't been practicing this philosophy. All right, that's enough of me rambling this week. I want to thank my patrons and everyone who follows the page on Facebook and Twitter and supports me on www.patreon.com/SundayStoic. I appreciate every one of you. Let me know if there's any topics you'd like to hear on the show, or if you have any show ideas or anything like that. Just email me, sundaystoic@gmail.com. I think I'm going to have a guest in the near future. One of my patrons might be joining the show for an episode, so look forward to that. And until I see you next week, Carpe Diem.
Thank you for listening to The Sunday Stoic. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review The Sunday Stoic on iTunes. Become a member of the Sunday Stoic team, earn rewards, and be an integral part of the show by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/SundayStoic. Contact the show by emailing sundaystoic@gmail.com. To find out more, visit www.sundaystoicpodcast.com. And as Steve always says, Carpe Diem.